podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.
Hello, I'm Peter Martin, founder of Peach 2020, the international network for senior executives, entrepreneurs, and influencers from across the hospitality sector. Welcome to the latest in our series of Top Table podcasts, which will see me in conversation with some of the biggest names in the out-of-home food and drink business, the real movers and shakers, picking up on the issues shaping the future of our industry. Hospitality businesses, as we all know, have been hit hard over the past 2 years, and those based in our urban centres have in the main been hit the hardest. But what's allowed some to survive while others have fallen by the wayside? Strong foundations, the ability to adapt. Now, one restaurant business which certainly falls into that survivor category is Hawksmoor. The steak specialist has diversified, becoming a leader in the meal kit business, and towards the end of last year started opening new sites again in London and New York. So I'm absolutely delighted to have with me, and on the line from New York, the co-founder and CEO of Hawksmoor, the award-winning Will Beckett. Will, welcome to Top Table. I suppose the first question is, what's the secret of survival? Or dare I say, the secrets of survival? What's kept Hawksmoor going through the past 2 years?
Firstly, hello, and thank you so much for a lovely introduction, by the way. I don't think I've never had, and live from New York. That felt really exciting.
Well, you're an international star of the restaurant world now, Will. There's no getting away from it.
Well, also thank you very much for that. That's kind. So it's funny, the survival thing. I remember, in fact, funnily enough, doing another podcast, and someone during kind of one of the dark days of the pandemic, and someone asked me about survival, and I said my strategy is the cockroach strategy, which means if every single restaurant in Britain goes down, we will be the last ones. We will absolutely be the last ones to survive. That's my plan for survival. And after one of the people who works at Hawksmoor said to me, I think probably you want to find a different analogy than that one. It doesn't sound great. But I was, it was funny, I was always confident that we would survive, even in, the early part of the pandemic, when it wasn't obvious to anyone, I don't think, whether your own business would survive or how long this would happen or anything. I was always confident. And I guess, in part there's luck there, isn't there? There's luck in terms of what was your financial position at the exact moment that the pandemic hit. But I really thought that Hawksmoor was well placed to survive. Firstly, because I looked around the room at the people who were working with me and just thought, not only would all of these people kind of go through a wall for each other, but they're brilliant at what they do, and it's really reassuring, isn't it, in a crisis to look around and see commitment and capability from everyone who you're around the table with. So that was great. But also, I really believed in Hawksmoor and in the brand and in how people feel about it. I think one of the real sort of light in the darkness moments for us was when the Evening Standard ran a poll, which was, what restaurant are you most looking forward to getting back to, and Hawksmoor came top. That really made us feel like, okay, we'll get through this, and on the other side, something good is there. So yeah, I think probably a combination of luck, the people that I'm around with, and just in the end, really the strength of Hawksmoor's brand.
But obviously what comes through from what you've just said is optimism has certainly played a big part, because and self-belief as well, because obviously that's what you've just described. And it's interesting because obviously towards the end of last year, you quite rightly picked up the award for at the Peach 2020 Awards, the Industry Leader of the Year, because obviously you've impressed your peers, because that award is voted for by fellow bar and restaurant leaders. So probably that's helped rub off on other people. I mean, I suppose it's also talking about that connection you've had with the industry as well. Has that been a core? Because there seems to be this great camaraderie which has come out of the industry.
Yeah, so to pick up on some of those, I mean, optimism is, I think it's kind of really at the heart of my job in a way. I think you're right that optimism played a big part in everything I just said, and I don't know really. Sometimes I've had moments in the past of almost sort of imposter syndrome. You know, what am I doing? You know, why am I running a company? And you know, surely other people who do this job are better than I am at this. But one thing I've always had is optimism. I've always been optimistic, and I've only learned the last 5-10 years maybe how important a resource that is, optimism, and how much people are attracted to it, and especially when it's in short supply. And I think it rubbed off on people in Hawksmoor. I think we managed to go through the pandemic with optimism that we would come out the other side, and with enough optimism that we try and launch Hawksmoor at home, that we held on to New York even though it should have opened, that we signed a deal to open our biggest ever restaurant in Wood Wharf. But you know, I don't know how the industry sees Hawksmoor and or sees me, but plausibly that optimism thing is part of it. I think we try to be optimistic at all times, and I think probably we felt that there was a need for that in the industry over the past couple of years, optimism and trying to get things done.
And also, I mean, you've innovated as well, and you've adapted. I mean, let's talk about Hawksmoor at home, because that's, you know, that, dare I say, kept the brand alive from us people living out in the sticks, as it were. So, you know, we can't get into London, can't go to a Hawksmoor. I mean, you're not the only one, but you've been the leader. And I think probably fair to say you've come out of the pandemic with a fully formed business there. I mean, tell us how that came about and where you are now.
Well, I mean, I totally agree, by the way, that it's been brilliant. I can't claim any credit for it, really. Tim Gould, who's our managing director, and Joe Fleet, who runs Hawksmoor at home, have amongst many other people, by the way, done an amazing job with it, and should really take the credit. And it sprang from them, really. Possibly the optimism to do it kind of springs a little bit from me, but the idea came from them, and it's kind of gone through phases. You know, in the dark days, it was a lifeline. I think not so much financially, although of course anything that was creating profit was quite welcome in those days. But it was a lifeline to lots of us. I think that Hawksmoor still matters to people. It still resonates with people. They still want what it is that we produce. And it created a whole load of work for a load of people at a time when being able to work and being productive felt really important, I think, to many people. But also we learned to customers. Some people wrote to us and kind of said, you know, it was horrific. You know, lockdown was horrific. But there were these lovely moments occasionally where you could just do something that felt special. And I think Hawksmoor at home brought some of that specialness of Hawksmoor into people's homes. And I think that's the bit that makes me the most happy. Not just that we could give people food, but that we managed to kind of create a sort of a meaningful Hawksmoor experience. And it's kind of accompanying specialness at homes. And if it kept it alive for anyone, I think, during lockdown, fantastic. But I think the interesting thing is now it's still keeping it alive. People who are not necessarily able to get to central London, Manchester, Edinburgh, or New York. Not that we sell them in the States, but you know what I mean. You know, we only operate in city centres and only in the biggest cities, really, in the UK and biggest city in the States. So being able to get it if you're in Harrogate or Dartmouth or wherever, really, feels great to me, because that's still the case. You can still have a Hawksmoor experience wherever you live. You don't have to come to one of our restaurants. And that's a really nice thing for us. And in the last 12 months, you know, our e-platform, if you like, took about £6 million, and it did almost £1 million just in December. So it still resonates, I think, even though those days of lockdown are behind us.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, on a personal note, I mean, in the depths, I remember we did it as a family, and we had Christine and I and our 4 children in various parts of the country all cooking at the same time on Zoom. It was great fun, and dare I say, I think what I was fascinated by is the professionalism you put in. It wasn't just a kit; you had videos telling people like me how to cook steaks properly, because I'm not very good at cooking steaks, but I'm better now thanks to you. So that professionalism came through, and is that why you now have a sustainable business? Because it seems to me that is a business in its own right. You've taken it out of the restaurants and set it as another part of Hawksmoor, which presumably is going to stand on its own and go forward on its own.
Well, I mean, I hope exactly that. That's what it does. I mean, it's interesting to see how well actually it's ticking along, even in January. How good sales are coming up for Valentine's Day in a couple of weeks, but. Exactly. I mean, and it's a difficult business, right? It was a business that was a bit easier when everybody's restaurants were shut. A lot of people were involved, and it did require quite a lot of thought and commitment and professionalization and a bit of money to go into trying to create something that works, even when all of your restaurants are open. I think that the number of people trying the at-home restaurant kits has shrunk quite a lot, hasn't it? Oh, and there are still some very, very good ones. I love what Akhtar Islam does. Tommy Banks is doing some great stuff. Gary at Elite Bistros is doing really, really interesting stuff. But there was a point where almost everyone was doing it, weren't they? But it has reduced down to a small number of us.
Yeah, but I think one of the other things which I think has come off that, and what you think, is that because of that, because you're dealing with people online, you're getting that relationship with people, that marketing has actually developed rather quicker than other things within the pandemic, i.e. the sophistication of perhaps marketing, the fact that, you've been talking about developing, I think you're hiring a CRM specialist as well, so your database is important, digital is becoming important. Is that sort of changed the way you look at that relationship with your customers, and how has marketing developed?
You are very well informed, by the way, if you know that we're hiring a CRM person. No,
I look at LinkedIn.
Okay, good. Well done. I mean, marketing is one of the parts of the business that I think about a lot. I really, really, really enjoy marketing and brand in a way that I don't enjoy, for example, operations. It's not really my thing. And I'm interested in how restaurants do marketing. I think, although this may not be the right place to say it, actually historically we are not an industry that does marketing particularly well. I don't think we're very sophisticated in our marketing or in our way of thinking about branding sometimes. But we are constantly trying to learn, and we hired a really great marketing director from outside the industry. From leisure in the last 12 months, and she's been fantastic. And Hawksmoor at Home, as you say, has been a platform where we've had to learn a lot. You've got to match supply and demand in a very different way to how you do it when you've got a tables and chairs restaurant, and it's all happening in the digital world. So how do we really bring that to life? How do we market it? How do we get new customers? How do we think about those customers? How do we build up our CRM platform has been catalyzed by COVID. And I hope we'll be doing more and more of that and learning again, because I think there's a huge way to go really for our industry and marketing, and a lot for us to learn.
The other part of your business is back to growth now. You're going back to bricks and mortar. You're opening Canary Wharf just before Christmas, and obviously you're in New York. You're open in a very grand building in Manhattan. How easy has that been to get that moving again, and how much nerve did it take to actually start getting back on the expansion wheel, as it were?
I mean, it took nerve, and actually, if I'm honest, it probably took. I remember quite clearly a conversation with our finance director where he kind of jolted me out, actually, of a real low about 12 months ago, the beginning of the beginning of the lockdown that lasted for such a long time at the beginning of last year. And these weren't his words, but I remember thinking, actually, we all need something to look forward to. We all need to look forward, and we need ambition, and we can't just allow ourselves, I think, to kind of wallow in how difficult everything is. And New York, I mean, as you know, New York got delayed essentially 18 months by the pandemic. We were due to open in March 2020. And we are now open, and that has been, it's been incredible, really, including the very cathartic New York Times review, which I think in its headline answered the question that probably ate away at us for the best part of 7 years that we've been trying to get this thing open. The phrase was, does New York need a British steak restaurant? Which is, that's the question, isn't it? The question.
It's fundamental, yeah.
And to which the answer was, yes, if it's Hawksmoor. That was the headline of the review, and that was cathartic. Wood Wharf was really interesting because it's the biggest restaurant I've ever done. By the time it's finished with the terrace and everything, it'll be about 400 covers, including the bar downstairs. Yeah, in Canary Wharf, and it's floating, and it's not the kind of building that you expect us to go into. And that took a bit of a leap of faith, I think, for me and Hugh in particular, who quite wedded to this sort of beautiful heritage building. But every time I see that restaurant or walk into it, I just think it's so beautiful. And I realise now, actually, that I think probably we were reacting to some extent to a risk of not having things that were interesting and ambitious and challenging and exciting in the future. And I think we've delivered that. And I hope we'll carry on doing that. We'll carry on trying to do exciting things, because it's what keeps you waking up and being excited about your job in the morning, right? Even if you're a bar back in Manchester, or a commie chef in London, or a part-time reservations person in Edinburgh, you're quite excited, I think, that Hawksmoor opened a restaurant in New York. Quite excited that they've got this huge thing in Wood Wharf, even if you'll never even go there as a customer. It's part of being part of something exciting is such a good feeling for people, and I hope we're delivering that.
So where next? How you've got those two open? Obviously, they've been planned for some time. Is the expansion going to continue, and at what sort of pace?
I do have some plans. I'm not going to entirely reveal to you, but we are looking at things. We look at cities that we feel excited by, and we don't have restaurants in the UK in all the cities that we feel excited by. And by that, I don't mean, we think we can make money. And we just want to spend time in. We think there's a connection between, Hawksmoor and who we are, and a city and who they are. And so I think we can do more. We are looking at more in the States. So there will be more. And I've come to embrace that a little bit. If I'm honest with you, I think you've known me long enough, haven't you, from sort of my independent restaurateur days, if you like, or kind of the more entrepreneurial stage, where I was nervous, I think, about growth, nervous about talking about it too much, and not wanting to come across as either kind of whatever, avaricious or money driven or whatever. And I don't feel that now, actually. I feel much more comfortable with what Hawksmoor is, and with the idea that we're a company that's trying to grow and do exciting things. And I feel comfortable that people know, I think, that we're not just doing this for the money. We're doing it because we're just trying to build something really, really great. And the purpose stuff that we've done, we went carbon neutral and announced that yesterday. There's lots more of that sort of thing to come as well. I'm really comfortable with it feeling exciting and different. And I know that we're not the small entrepreneurial company anymore. And I'm really comfortable that's okay.
But you can still be entrepreneurial. It's not, being a good entrepreneur is not really about size, is it always?
No, I know what you mean. I think when I say entrepreneurial, I mean where the founder really needs to be hands on all the levers at all time and just in the business all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not like that at Hawksmoor. We've got an exceptional group of people. As you know, I've never been someone who's kind of been on the floor. That's not what I do. I'd be hopeless at it. So I think that's really what I mean. It is, of course, the growth thing is entrepreneurial, but I think when you're a small restaurateur, the kind of restaurants that I tend to go to, where I've traditionally kind of made them, the most friends and got to know people, are small independent restaurants or small groups of restaurants, really founder-led. 1, 2, 3 things, great food, but if we're being honest, probably for the most part, not a huge amount of design budget, not a lot of money, not kind of exceptional businesses, but just great food and great environments. And I think those people, and I count myself amongst them really, have always had a fear that growing involves some compromise on sort of standards and integrity and all of those things. And I think Hawksmoor is a really good example that it doesn't have to. I think Hawksmoor is better standards-wise and better integrity-wise than it was when it was a small company. It means a lot to me. And that's what kind of now why I feel a bit less uncomfortable talking about kind of growth, because I feel really comfortable that we're going to get better and we're going to do more purpose stuff, more integrity, and not just grow and run the risk of dilution or accept dilution.
Let's pick up on two of those areas of integrity. You just talked about it, that you're now carbon neutral. How important is that to you, and how have you got to that stage? I know there's further to go, and we'll come on to that. But how important is being that, particularly as a steak restaurant?
So when Hugh and I started the business, now feels a long time ago, 2003. Not Hawksmoor, by the way, but the pre-Hawksmoor business. We just talked about doing things the right way. That's the only way we phrased it, and we didn't really know what that meant. We just knew we wanted, kind of an ethical heart to the business that we ran. And over time, that kind of developed really into thinking about sustainability, charity, and being a good employer. And I think we did well in those areas. We've won awards for being a good employer. We've raised or donated a lot of money for charity, and we're one of the most sustainable restaurants with the Sustainable Restaurant Association. But during COVID, I think we really just sat down and had a lot of time to think, what do we want to do? And I think the answer was kick on, be more ambitious with that sort of stuff. Excuse me. And the carbon neutral moment is obviously it's a signpost. It's a milestone, isn't it, in a longer journey? Yeah. But it does feel really important to us. It feels important that that's the kind of thing that we should be doing. And you're right, for a steak restaurant to do it, and it's not easy to do, and it's certainly not easy to get to the next stage, which is net zero. But that's the journey that we're on, and I think we're going to do really, really well with it. I think we've really tried to embrace purpose a lot more this year, and as a kind of platform for doing better over future years.
Now, obviously, one of the issues you say it's a stepping stone, a milestone. Net zero is the ultimate destination, and you're on that journey. But obviously, a lot of that comes into the supply chain, and the supply chain is complicated, particularly if you're selling meat as well. There's a whole lot going on about the future of British agriculture as well. How are you sort of engaging with that supply chain to, one, actually be ethical in a general sense about what you sell, but also in terms of getting to net zero? Because that seems to be the key, and you've got to work with your supply chain.
Yes, I'm going to dip into technical for a second. Not that technical, by the way, but potentially the sort of thing that sends some people off to sleep. But the carbon neutral process, you go through scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 is the emissions for you and your business. Scope 2 is the kind of the energy that you buy in, electricity, gas, etc. And scope 3 is your supply chain's emissions. You put all of that together, you come up with a baseline, and you can offset that baseline, which makes you carbon neutral. Net zero is you set targets to get those emissions down and down and down and down and down and down and down. And if you keep hitting all of those targets, then there's a very small offset at the end, which creates net zero. So that's the journey that we're on. We've already started. We've moved in-house to green electricity. We're sending waste fuel off to make biogas, all sorts of things. Supply chain's a big part of it, right? So we can do it. There's a variety of ways to do it. Offsetting is part of the journey, but getting the reduction in emissions is the key thing. And I think we start from a really good place at Hawksmoor. So because we've always been focused on sustainability, and we've always had the view that ethically reared beef tastes the best, but also is best for the environment, in terms of carbon sequestration back in the land, in terms of kind of working with farms that are involved with rewilding, all that sort of thing. But there is work to be done, and in my experience, most of the people in the Hawksmoor supply chain are really keen to do it as well. So I think what we'll see over the next, the target for net zero is 2030, right? But over the next 8-9 years, is everyone in that supply chain making a concerted effort to try to get emissions down. It will never get to zero, but I think that's okay. It's the concerted effort that is the point, because I think we're already working from a very good place. However, by the way, there is a lot of the beef industry, especially here in the States where I am today, which is not in a good place. There's a lot of the beef industry which is quite polluting in a variety of ways, by the way, not just emissions, but its effect on local water and land and all that sort of thing. So I also hope that we play a part in kind of showing what the best in class beef looks like. We've always said, if you want to eat meat, eat less but eat better. Yeah. And I think it just what happens that if you're interested in animal welfare, flavour, or the environment, it all comes back to essentially the same way of rearing cattle.
Now, the other area of doing the right thing is around people, and obviously the industry, and you're in New York. It's not just the British thing. Hospitality has a people shortage problem. In fact, business tends to have a business shortage problem because of the Great Resignation, as well as sort of local difficulties, which is to do with hospitality. But Hawksmoor seems to have got it right in terms of keeping staff. Going back to the secrets. Why is Hawksmoor a great employer? Because, as you say, you come top of polls. You're seen as one of the best places to work, not just in hospitality, but across business as a whole. How do you go about it? How do you get those results?
It's a complex answer without a simple set of things. But I think my view broadly is the industry at times convinces itself that it is a bit better than it is as an employer. I know, by the way, that some of the really dark days are behind us for a lot of places. The kind of the screaming, the shouting, the abuse of staff that I think we all find kind of abhorrent is for the most part gone. But it often occurs to me that the story that the industry most likes to tell about working in restaurants, pubs, or hospitality is one about kind of ambition and opportunity. If you start as a pot wash at 16, you could be running a company at 45. That's the way up. It's a very upwardly mobile industry is one of our stories. And by the way, let's not take away from that. There's a lot of truth in that. Although actually, as it happens, when I look around the industry, I tend to see a lot of very similar people with similar backgrounds kind of at the top end of it, which kind of suggests, and I don't at the bottom end, which kind of suggests that we're not quite as effective at it as we think we are. But obviously it's got truth in it. The thought I've always had is that's great for the person who gets to the top. But what about the people that don't? Waiters, kitchen porters, commie chefs, receptionists, barbacks, those people. I think my sense has been, if you can show those people what a good job looks like, without having to say, but you could get promoted and you could earn more money and take on more responsibility. I think if you can get to that somewhere, that's probably the secret. And it's not easy, by the way. And part of the privilege of Hawksmoor is because the restaurants are high spend per head, and because we only work in cities where there's a service charge or good tipping culture. People in those jobs earn reasonably good money, and it's much more difficult to earn good money if you're working in a community pub, for example. But I think that's at the heart of it. How do you make sure that jobs are good for those people? And I think at Hawksmoor, we try to do that with lots of support, with a kind of adult-to-adult kind of culture where we treat people respectfully. And we try to make sure that they get learning and development opportunities that are not just about the specific skills they need to do their job well, but they're about life skills that would enable them to do other jobs well. And of course, that philosophy kind of runs right up through the hierarchy as well. Managers get all of that stuff, maybe more of it. But I think that's the key thing is, what do your basic jobs look like, your entry-level jobs? Because that's where almost everyone comes into the industry. And by the way, I'm guessing it's what drives the vast majority of the churn. That's where people leave. And I think if we can get that bit right, then you've got a much better chance of kind of a more sustainable environment for recruitment in the industry.
Well, thank you, Will Beckett. We've covered a lot of ground there. And I know because people tell me you do inspire people in the industry. The question is, who inspires you? Where do you get your inspiration, your perk up, as it were?
That's a really good question. I mean, the answer, I think, is rarely a stable one. I'm often fascinated by people for a period of time, and I kind of try and learn from them. So, I mean, I went through a huge McDonald's phase, for example. We went to Des Plaines in Illinois, and we spent a lot of time trying to kind of learn from McDonald's, and we wrote about it in our book. And I hugely embarrassed my extremely foodie mother by acknowledging that we tried to learn from McDonald's, which was another story you can read about in the book. I mean, New York now, I think, Danny Meyer's been a huge source of inspiration to me. I know you've already spoken to him, but I find Mitch really inspiring at Rockfish.
Mitch Tonks,
I'm on his board, which and I have been for about 5 years now, and I would definitely say that has given me more than I have given it. I've loved being part of that business, and I find him and his team and the way they think about stuff, particularly product, really, really inspiring, and how they grow in a completely different set of circumstances. If you were in London talking about recruitment problems, people who are in Torquay laugh at you. You've only got 1 million people on tap to employ, all of whom have worked in hospitality for 3 or 4 years. Poor you. I find there's lots and lots of people I find inspiring, and I try to read a lot and learn a lot from people outside our industry as well, because I think sometimes it's difficult to. Marketing being a good example, actually, it's difficult to learn when you're already embedded in something, in hospitality, in a way of doing things. I quite like trying to get my head up and learn from other people.
Well, Will Beckett, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This series of podcasts is sponsored by Bidfood, Fourth, Stint and Zonal. The Peach Podcast is always free to listen to. To find us, search Peach 2020 Top Table on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or on any app that supports podcasts. All of our podcasts will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. Now, don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss our future episodes. Thank you.
Podcast from Peach 2020, hosted by Peter Martin.